We want to bring in Ron Hosko. He's kind of one of our go-to men when it comes to these sort of situations. Ron, can you hear us? Okay.
Hello, hello.
There you go. We got Ron on. Okay, perfect. So glad you're joining us now. I know this is a situation where there are certainly, not to use a cliche, but more questions than answers. This has been quite a mystery because it just seemed like she disappeared without a trace. But at this stage now, we're learning that a body has been found. Where does the investigation go from here? I imagine finding a body as disappointing and as heartbreaking as it is a huge step forward to solving this mystery.
Well, it very well could be. First, they're going to examine this body forensically to try to establish a time or date of death, the mechanism, the means of that death. They're going to comb over that body in great detail for signs that indicated signs indicative of a struggle, for DNA of a potential offender, any minutia that might give them a clue as to where she has been, how long she has been there, and anyone who links to anyone who may have had a hand in her death. Of course, unfortunately with kidnappings of this nature, the more time goes by, the less likely that you're going to have a positive outcome. And here, this young lady has been missing for weeks. We had some, I guess maybe hints from the father, the belief that she was still alive and with someone, perhaps someone she knew, that there was a relationship of some sort, mistaken judgment. But now we come to this very tragic end, and the hope is, of course, that law enforcement can put the pieces together and identify who was responsible.
For those of us, Ron, who live in big metropolitan cities, it's sometimes difficult for people to understand in a city of 9, 10, 11 million people like the greater New York City area, where it feels as if people can disappear very easily. A lot of people struggle to understand how somebody in a small community, apparently there are only about 1,500 residents of this small Iowa town, Brooklyn, could go missing. Does that, as an FBI investigator, does that tell you that that they may have been taken away from this community, or could they just sort of be in plain sight? And I don't mean in plain sight, but just sort of in the surrounding area. And because of the fact that it's a much smaller community, it's a lot easier to hide or to kidnap somebody and keep them hidden.
Yeah, look, we've seen examples across the country where people have been kidnapped off the streets, and there are witnesses. The unblinking eye of a camera, a security camera down the block. I'm taken back to one a few years ago in Philadelphia where this young lady was kidnapped off the street, and there was some video down the street, and fortunately she was later found alive with the offender. I think it was down in Delaware. And so you have in that urban environment a greater opportunity, I think, for cameras, for witnesses, for neighbors, from somebody just passing on the street to say, oh, I have a description. And, oh, by the way, and then police can track it back potentially to a car or a ticket that was issued nearby. And in this rural environment, I think, there's a different set of challenges there. Typically speaking, those cameras are not in place. It may be relatively remote, and it sounds as though if she were jogging in near an Iowa cornfield, the opportunity for someone to drive by, potentially bump her with a car, hit her with a car, injure her in some way, and put her in the car and take her away without anybody seeing, without anybody hearing, is frankly greater, just because of the lack of population density, the lack of folks nearby in a wide open territory. So it does present law enforcement with additional challenges. I'm sure there have been reports about the FBI devoting a couple dozen agents to this. I'm sure they have, and I'm sure they have gone through all of the expected, kind of the checklist of procedures, looking for who are the sexual predators who are registered in that area, who else is in that area, who has shown an interest in this young lady, who's she been communicating with. Could it have been some would-be paramour from her past that popped back up, that has been quietly watching her, that intended her harm because she rebuffed him? Any of those opportunities, any of those possibilities is going to be looked at very vigorously by law enforcement.
So, Ron, one of the people that got a lot of media attention was this farmer that lived outside of Brooklyn, several miles from Brooklyn. I don't know how the media got wind of his name, but, we learned that he had been questioned repeatedly by the FBI, which certainly made him an interesting character. And then he was pretty guarded on television, first refusing to do a polygraph. Later on, he admitted on a television station that he actually did do the polygraph test. I guess I have a few questions. If polygraph tests aren't admissible in court, then why would the FBI find them valuable?
Well, look, I've used that technique in my cases in the past, and in the hands of a competent, capable polygrapher, you can coax a confession. You can get tips and clues. You can get a comfort level that we are interviewing the wrong person. Or you can get signs that tell you, despite denials, that you're looking at exactly the right person. So I think law enforcement does view it as a tool in the toolbox, not necessarily positive, but sometimes it can be because it leads to a confession. Go ahead.
Should an innocent person avoid doing a polygraph test?
I don't think so. I think, again, in the hands of a competent examiner, look, I've been polygraphed in my own career for security purposes, and your apprehension level, your anxiety level does ratchet up as they're putting wires across you and hooking you into this device to probe whether you're being truthful. And so a competent, capable polygraph examiner understands those signs, understands in their pretest procedures how to account for those signs that are purely anxiety because of the test, which is common, and that which looks like deception. And so I think it is a very valuable tool for law enforcement. You can't rely on it solely, as you mentioned, not admissible in courts, however, can provide you useful clues to say, hey, we're on the right person. Let's put round-the-clock surveillance on this person. They're failing the test. We have to narrow our focus. We have to get additional information that may give us probable cause for a search of their property, to conduct additional investigation surrounding one person, or to potentially say, hey, look, this is the wrong person. Let's cross them off the list and concentrate our efforts somewhere else.
Ron, in cases such as this, is it typically conventional wisdom, and that conventional wisdom that is proven by investigations that the FBI has conducted, that people who are kidnapped are generally kidnapped by someone that they know or someone that they are connected to somehow, that these things are not generally random? Or am I wrong in citing that?
Yeah, really the very small minority of actual stranger abductions in the country, that is the small minority. And then you expand out from that and you look at the kidnappings that are conducted by a parent because there's a divorce pending, there's a separation pending, and so you have a parent taking the child without the court's authority, sometimes to foreign countries. You have, familiarity with people who are potential offenders. That might be a neighbor, somebody that's in line of sight, a sexual predator, somebody with prior contact. But the true stranger abductions really are, I think, in very much in the minority, and really only a couple of dozen a year.
And so